Well, there's a huge week coming up in the EFL Championship with lots of defining games next Saturday. But before all those 6-pointers, there's a chance for teams to pick up crucial points in a full fixture list across Tuesday and Wednesday night. We're going to run through all 12 games, preview and predict the outcomes. And of course, as always, I'll encourage you to do exactly the same in the comments below. If you beat or match my score, you'll get a shout out in the next recap, which will be on Thursday ahead of the big weekend fixture list. But for now, before we go and focus on matchday 36 as the championship table tightens up, let's go and have a quick look back at how we all got on at the weekend, because matchday 35 was really frustrating for me. I picked up 6 points with a perfect score for Millwall v Watford and 3 other correct outcomes, but I got all of the shocks right or pretty much there. I just didn't quite go bold enough with some of them. I was about the only person not to predict a Leicester win against QPR, but I went for a 1-1 draw and QPR went one better. I stuck a goal in that Preston Hull game, which will always haunt me. And a couple of my Championship's favourite scorelines, well, they were all 1 goal out. If a lot of games had gone 1 goal the other way, we might have been talking about a very different outcome. But as it is, loads of you beat me. And most importantly, we've got a new record setter in the history of Championship predictions on this channel. We'll get to that in a minute. But firstly, 3 people join me on 6 points. Bobby for 6 correct outcomes. Mello and Steve with 1 perfect score. 4 people on 7 points. 2 of you with 1 correct score, which were Lewis and Peter. 2 with 2 correct scores, Daniel and Teo. 3 people on 8 points. Simon got 1 correct score. Chris and Aksha got 2. On 9 points, Ojo with 1 correct score. A lot of you got West Brom's 2-1 win on Friday night. Then W&G in double figures, 3rd place with 10 points and 2 perfect scores. Glimpse in 2nd place, 11 points with 3 perfect scores. A great effort on any other match day. And to be fair, that's a pretty low scoring week across the board. Until we get to our winner. BPK, and I had to check this, 18 points with 5 correct scores. You beat my record on this channel by 1 point. My highest ever was 17, and you've now gone and got 18. 5 correct scores is also a record. No one has ever got more than 4, so you deserve huge credit. Got all of the first 3 right as well. One hell of a start to the weekend before the Saturday 3 p.m.s even kicked off. Imagine if you'd done brilliantly in those. It could have been a very different story. But what an effort. Deserves a special mention. Now let's see if you can all back this up in midweek, because in matchday 36 we start with, well, a huge relegation 6-pointer on Tuesday night. 2 teams in 17th and 18th. You might think, oh, there are a few places clear of relegation. What's to worry? Well, they're both only 1 point clear now. It is Blackburn Rovers versus Millwall. And John Eustace, after largely playing a run of away games since joining the club, is really going to need to find his Birmingham City home form from the start of the season. Blackburn lost 2-1 at Swansea to end a run of draws. And to be fair, they're letting 2 in the first 20 minutes. You can't give teams a 2-goal head start. I've said it a lot with Luton this year in the Premier League. Wasn't actually much in the game. Very even in terms of possession, in terms of chances. Swansea had the best one in a match, but Blackburn didn't have that ruthless edge. The positive is they're a bit tighter defensively, as in they're not giving up 15-20 chances per match, but they're not creating as much either. So there is a negative on that side, and Blackburn are seeming to tee off between attacking brilliance and defensive solidity, and at the moment, just not quite right. But the home form is going to be crucial for John Eustace, and this game, well, it's massive, because Millwall under Neil Harris, they have started in style, and they made the change at the right time, because if Joe Edwards had lost those 2 games and still been there, well, Millwall could have been marooned in 23rd at this point. Those 6 points have put them 1 above the relegation zone, as everyone down there is seemingly winning. And they've now dragged teams as high as 12th place, like the team they beat on Saturday, Watford, into a relegation battle. So this one is going to be absolutely essential. Millwall have been really rock solid defensively the last 2. They've gone back to basics. They've not had a huge attacking threat. They won that one via a deflected strike, but they've given up possession. They've scrapped. They've fought hard defensively. And while Watford probably should have got something out of that game, it's a huge win. And it doesn't matter how they come at the minute. For this game, though, I'm looking at it and thinking the expectation is going to be that Millwall will get a result now. There have been signs that Millwall will give up chances, and Blackburn have got people who can score goals. And John Eustace at home is normally a good manager. And to be fair, in his last home game in charge against Norwich, they actually played pretty well and didn't give up too much. Conceded from a stunning free kick. So I'm going to go for Blackburn to nick this one. I'm starting with one that goes against the grain and against the form book, I'm sure. But I'm going to go for Blackburn to win the first game of the evening. Could easily be a Championship's favourite scoreline. I'm going for Blackburn to win by 2-1. As we move on to one of those that's a home banker on paper, and there's a few of them this week, which really worries me. It is Coventry City versus Rotherham United. Yes, 2 defeats in a row for Coventry in the league, but let's be honest, they were awful against Preston. They were better against West Brom. They had a lot more of the chances, but didn't create a huge amount that was really clear-cut, and I think in the end that was probably what told. But it was a really close game between two very good sides, and Coventry very much still in that promotion battle. And you could argue, given the way teams below are slipping away, it probably is only down to 9th now for those last 2 spots. For Rotherham, it is the run of defeats that continues. The home game against Sheffield Wednesday, the next closest team, and they lost it again. They only managed 1 shot on target. Sheffield Wednesday had 3 or 4 brilliant opportunities. It's a bit of a crime it was only 1, and I could have done with them taking 1 more from the perfect score point of view. But Rotherham just can't afford to do that against their closest rivals at the bottom. They've now got half the amount of points of another team in the relegation zone. And to be honest with you, it's just not been competitive for the last couple of months. I like Liam Richardson. I thought he'd get them a bit closer. But it looks like after what happened in January that Rotherham are just preparing for next season. So I'm going to go for Coventry to win this handsomely. I think it'll be a comfortable home performance. They'd been in great form before the last 2 games. I think Rotherham will attempt to frustrate. And I'm going to go for Coventry to win. Rotherham with no attacking threat. 2-0 at the CBS for the home team. As we move on to a game that's big at both ends of the table, 6th v 20th, it is Hull City versus Birmingham City. Birmingham, heartbreak at the end against Southampton. Did so well to get level again after going down to 10 men against Southampton. But then in the 96th minute to throw it away. Defensively, just didn't have enough to compete. And Southampton were the better team. Probably deserved it in the end. For Hull City, a 0-0 draw away at Preston. 2 sides in that battle, 2 really solid teams cancelling each other out. But got to be fair, it was a pretty good game to watch in fairness. But for Hull, it's a long unbeaten run now. 5 in a row since that disappointing defeat against Swansea. And again, at this stage of the season, as I saw with Luton last year, teams that don't concede many, teams that are able to fight for points in every game and be competitive, are always going to be the ones that are up there. So for this game, I have to go with a form book. I'm going to go for Hull City to nick it. I think it will be a tighter game than people expect. I'm going to go for Hull to win by their favourite score. A 2-1 win for them at home to Birmingham. As we move on to another one that probably falls into home banker category, 3 in a row you could argue. It is Leeds United versus Stoke City. But not based on the weekend perhaps, because Stoke against Middlesbrough finally got their win under Steven Schumacher. A 2-0 victory, a really decent performance. Gave up a bit more of the ball. Yes, Middlesbrough had a couple of chances, but Stoke City have been decent in a lot of games under Schumacher. They had a couple of heavy defeats, but they've probably deserved a little more than they've got. They're still in the relegation zone despite the win, but the best thing they've done at the weekend is drag Borough back into it. They're now just 6 points behind them in 14th, and 2 home wins in 3 means they're able to pick up a bit of momentum. For Leeds, it was a day of what might have been. Going behind to a set piece against Huddersfield. Then after that late first half red card for the host, they just weren't able to take chances. They got into plenty of good positions, but in truth, they didn't carve Huddersfield open a huge number of times. Yes, they probably had a couple of clear-cut chances and should have won the game overall, but it wasn't the most convincing Leeds display, particularly late on when Huddersfield were able to defend the box with numbers and really restrict Leeds from finding that space in behind, which they're so good at usually away from home. So I think they will bounce back at home to Stoke. I still fancy Leeds to get promoted. But this game is a really important one. After the defeat in the Cup and that draw against Huddersfield, they've got to win. But then for Stoke, you've got to say the same. They've not looked as good away from home under Schumacher. They've conceded multiple goals against Cardiff and Blackburn. And Leeds arguably have a more potent attack than both of those. In fact, they do by far. So I'm going to go for Leeds to win it. And I'm going to go for a high-scoring game this time. 3-1 for the hosts at Ellen Road. The next one is a huge one at the bottom of the division. It is in-form Sheffield Wednesday against a Plymouth side who are, well, better away from home seemingly under Ian Foster. They're up in 16th place, but just 2 points clear of the relegation zone. A 2-0 defeat at home to fellow promoted side Ipswich pretty much summed up both of their seasons. Plymouth starting to struggle for goals at home, and Ipswich by far the better team in that game. But on the road against Middlesbrough, they were very good last time out. Sheffield Wednesday, though, have picked up 4 wins in 5. They've won 3 in a row, and all 4 of those wins against sides in the bottom half, teams that are going to be in and around them at the end of the year. The only games they've lost recently, against top of the table Leicester and against Coventry in the FA Cup. Ike Ugbo, I say what I said in the last episode, is the signing of the January window. Not a doubt about that. He's been phenomenal. The match winner again away at Rotherham, albeit they should have scored far more. But for this game, we've got a bit of a different scenario because this is where Sheffield Wednesday now come in and say, we expect to win. And will they be able to do so against a Plymouth side that will set up resolutely away from home? I've just got a feeling that I'm going to have to go for a bit of a hunch on this one. Everything would say Sheffield Wednesday win. I think it might be a bit of a frustrating day. I'm going to go for the Championship's favourite scoreline and a 1-1 draw at Hillsborough. And I'm not basing that on stats, I'm basing that on just a gut feeling. And basically, I've been scarred by Luton Sheffield United a few weeks ago. It's as simple as that. As we move on to a huge game between two sides that I did not expect to be explaining in this way. Two of the out-of-form teams in the division. It is Sunderland versus leaders Leicester City, who have now lost 3 league games in a row. Defeat at home to QPR, probably far more concerning for them than the defeats against Borough and Leeds, who do have the individual quality on their day. But against QPR, who are battling for their lives, well, they really struggled. Went into a 2-0 deficit. Yes, had plenty of the ball. Yes, had more of the chances. But again, didn't really create too many clear-cut opportunities. QPR were ruthless, no doubt about that. We'll get to them later. But Leicester City, for all the dominance, for all the shots, they didn't really have great opportunities too often. I said at the start of the season in the pre-season predictions that I didn't think Leicester would win the league. And even when they were 10, 12 points clear, I still had that element of doubt because I'd watched Maresca's Parma and I'm starting to see some signs of it. I still don't think Leicester win the title. The gap is down to 3 now and they really need to respond in this game. They go away to a Sunderland side that themselves have gone 4 games without a point. They've only scored 2 goals in that time. And away against Norwich at the weekend, again, very little threat on the road. And I bet the owners feel silly for letting Tony Mowbray go now because what a mess they've become since then. Yes, they had a couple of opportunities against Norwich, but Norwich looked the better of the two, and you wouldn't have said that a few months ago. So this game's a really tricky one to predict. I feel Leicester have to get back to winning ways. I feel Sunderland are going to have pressure on them, but they've just made a hash of it off the pitch in the last few months. I don't feel they've got enough of a threat, and I'm going to go for Leicester to get back to what they did earlier in the season. Maybe not be at their best, maybe not keep as much of the ball, but to nick a win, an ugly one away from home. I'm going for Sunderland 1, Leicester 2, and they're going to need that badly. As we move on to the side directly chasing Leicester in the final game on Tuesday night, it is Ipswich Town versus Bristol City. Another one you could put into home banker territory. Bristol City, I said I give up last time, seriously. Beat Middlesbrough away from home, Southampton at home, and have now lost 3 in a row against QPR, Sheffield Wednesday, and at home to Cardiff. They are the worst team in the world to predict, I promise you that. They're now just 6 points clear of relegation and have to look over their shoulder. They sacked Nigel Pearson 4 points off the playoffs because they felt they had a top 6 team and he wasn't delivering enough. Well, they're now 12 points off the playoffs and in a relegation battle. That ain't ideal by any stretch. For Ipswich, after that sticky spell in and around the FA Cup tie, 5 wins in a row. And I think the last 2 performances show how important that last-minute winner against Rotherham was. The momentum it's given, not just for the home win against Birmingham, but away at Plymouth too. They've started to look somewhere near back to their best in those 2 matches. And I think that looking forward, Ipswich may be able to sneak the top 2. They've not got those standout stars, but they've got a number of quality footballers and a great team unit. Kieran McKenna, no matter what happens, has to be manager of the season for me. And I think they're going to win this one comfortably. I know Bristol City can spring a surprise against anyone, but they've got to look over their shoulder and there's actual pressure on them now. So I think Ipswich will win and I think they'll win it comfortably. They generally concede at home, but they outscore the opposition. I'm going by 3 goals to 1. As we move on to the 5 games on Wednesday night, and we start with another one that's huge for the away team at the bottom. It is Cardiff City versus Huddersfield Town. And you know what? Massive credit to Cardiff. I had them in the battle at the start of the season. Most people did. They predicted them to be in and around the bottom 3. They've not been entertaining the last couple of months. They've had a sticky spell in the middle of the season. But Errol Bullock, with what he's got and with some of the injuries he's had, has done a really good job. Again, weren't brilliant against Bristol City. 0-0 would have been a fair result because neither created much. But just like they did against Stoke, they ended their run. So they've ended their home winless run. They've now ended the away one. And they've got themselves safe, haven't they? They're 9 points clear. They're on to that 47 mark. One more to the 50 mark and you say it's done. Could they yet sneak into that playoff place? They're as close to that as they are the relegation mix. They're at home to Huddersfield, who are scrapping for their lives. And do you know what? At 1-0 up, playing really well against Leeds. What on earth's Jonathan Hogg doing? Seriously, your most experienced player. Such an innocuous, stupid thing to do on halfway. No pressure at all, right before the break. Absolute mind-blowing stupidity. But they defended well. They defended in numbers. The set-piece threat they create from Hellick and Pearson, etc. Hellick, of course, disappointed not to start, but made an impact. And you've got to say Sorba Thomas. I've said it for so long. Set-piece delivery is the best in the league for me. And it got them the point in that game. They're in a decent bit of form themselves, but you just don't know what to predict at the bottom. Away from home, of course, they've won against the likes of Watford and some of those other mid-table teams, but this game's going to be so tight. I genuinely don't know what to go for. I think Huddersfield will try and press, but will they have that miss in midfield? Will they score from a set piece where Cardiff are pretty strong as well? I could actually see this being a set piece apiece, and I'm going to go, as a result, for the Championship's favourite scoreline of 1-1. As we move on to perhaps under pressure Michael Carrick, as it's Middlesbrough versus Norwich City. Middlesbrough have somehow slipped into a relegation battle and are now just 6 points off the safety line themselves. They're playing a Norwich side who are chasing the playoffs, are just 1 point off it now. And after that pressure on David Wagner from the Bristol City Cup tie, they've basically not really lost since. They've been magnificent in truth. They've shown different sides of their game as well. Big 4-2 wins at home to Watford, 4-1 at home to Cardiff. Couple of gritty points on the road. And then a real difficult 1-0 win at home to Sunderland, where a late goal from Josh Sargent. They've stayed in the game defensively. And he's really adapted his style a bit. He's got his best defence back now, I think, which helps a little as well. And going forward, they've got options who can always create goals. But Josh Sargent is the main man. There's no doubt about that. And going into this game, Middlesbrough are under big pressure. A great win away at Leicester. But in any game where the onus is on them to control it, they just haven't got a goal scorer. No goals in the last 2 against Plymouth and Stoke. And they just cannot break down a defence. I mean, the amount of goals they've lost from the team last season is frightening. I'm still not convinced by Senny Dieng in goal, but that's another story for another day. Greenwood worked hard, but he doesn't look a goal threat. Latilaf probably not match fit yet. Finn Azaz has been hot and cold at times. Riley McGree not at his best. Marcus Force just can't hit a barn door at the minute. It must be so frustrating as a manager because they do create chances, albeit they weren't at their best against Stoke, but they had enough chances to get a result out of it. It probably was a pretty even game. I think officially they both had 2 clear-cut attempts, but Middlesbrough, they just haven't got the goal threat. And against the Norwich side, if it becomes a game about who can outscore the other, I think Norwich can take that risk and probably win it. Now, Middlesbrough have turned up their game when they've played the top sides recently, so I wouldn't be shocked to be wrong here. On the form book, I have to go for Norwich to nick it. I'm going to go for Josh Sargent to score in a 2-1 Norwich win. As we move on to 2 sides who are in the battle for, well, automatic promotion and the playoffs respectively, it is Southampton versus Preston North End. What an important moment that Joe Aribo produced there. Had a frustrating season, not been involved a lot. But that could be the most important moment of the year, depending on how it finishes for them. After letting in the goal against Birmingham when they were down to 10, they must have thought it was going to be one of those days. They dominated the match, they had more of the chances. But in the end, Joe Aribo produced the goods. And no one will remember how they won the games. They'll remember that they nicked the 4-3 win. My mate was there, a Southampton fan, assures me it was as bonkers as it looked. For Preston v Hull, I've said it again, it was a decent game this one. But Preston just find a way to get results. No matter whether they're playing well, no matter whether they're having to defend, and no matter what quality of opposition they're facing. They just find a way. They've got a thin squad, so they're probably a few injuries away from a disaster. But at the minute, they're doing so well. And as you've got to say, Ryan Lowe has got through that sticky patch in the middle, and after that brilliant start to the season, they're starting to find form again at the right time. To be 3 points off the playoffs and looking down at some of those sides in the bottom half below them, he has to take credit. He's done a really good job. So for this game, I think it's going to be really tight. I think for Southampton, it's going to be the polar opposite of what we saw against Birmingham. We've seen Southampton struggle a couple of times playing at home against sides playing for a draw. And we know that Ryan Lowe's going to go away there and be as defensive and gritty as possible. Southampton's job is to stay switched on, not concede from a counter-attack or a set piece, and then to find a way through. It might take a screamer, a deflection, whatever it may be. But I think Southampton are going to nick this by 1-0. Not a game that's going to define Preston's season, but I would not be shocked if they got a point here. As we move on to the penultimate game between Watford and Swansea City. Watford remarkably in the top half, but in a relegation battle, just 6 points clear. Will Valerian Ismail be in charge by this game? There's a lot of talk behind the scenes. The only win in recent memory, a 1-0 away at Rotherham where they relied on a screamer. And I think, as he said, the confidence is clearly low, but they're not really creating great opportunities, and that's the problem. He said it himself again against Millwall. Yes, we kept them open a few times. Yes, we played well. We played better. We dominated the ball. We had more opportunities, but we didn't really carve them open that many times. And I think that's the thing that will be a worry, because you can't keep singing the same story every day. For Swansea, 2 crucial wins. They're now 4 points clear of the relegation zone after wins at Sunderland and at home to Blackburn. And it's always great to get a good early start, isn't it? They made it more nervy than it needed to be at the end. They weren't as creative as you would normally expect from a Luke Williams side, but they did their job. And as we've said for a lot of teams at this stage of the season, it's not really about how you play, is it? It's about winning. If Swansea win this, they will go above Watford and inevitably put a lot of pressure on them. I'm not sure I'm going to bank on them to do it, though. This game, again, it's got one of those feels where people are now going to expect Swansea to win. I think they'll have a lot of the ball, and I think their style may suit Watford a bit more. I don't know whether they'll still have the manager in charge, but I'm going to go for the Championship's favourite scoreline. I feel Watford might get something out of this, and 1-1, probably not a bad score for either of them. So that's what I'm going to go for. And the final game is another one that's big at both ends of the table. It is out of the relegation zone. QPR are home to 5th place and flying West Bromwich Albion. West Brom are home to Coventry. Let's deal with that first from TV on Friday night. Coventry with a better side. They had a lot more of the ball, a lot more chances. But West Brom are so disciplined under Carlos Corberán. They're such a threat going forward. When they do make their chances, they make them count. They're so good on the counter. He's done a wonderful job. And I've said it most of the season, but you can't underestimate how similar that team is to Huddersfield. If you look at the structure, if you look at the way they're defending and the way that they're set up in shape, they've been magnificent. They're maximising the talent they've got. There's a feel-good factor at the club with the takeover going through. It's just a really good time to be a West Brom fan, and I think they're going to be in the playoffs. I think everyone else is fighting for one spot. For QPR, massive credit for getting out the relegation zone. I continue to give massive credit to Marty Cifuentes because he's adapted. He's playing a style so far away from what he wants to play at the moment, but he's found a way to get results. And do you know what? You look at that game and you think, oh, that's a Gareth Ainsworth performance. 2 shots on target, 2 goals, got battered the rest of the game. But they had a great defensive shape. They didn't let Leicester carve them open. It was very similar to the second half of Huddersfield Leeds, to be honest with you, from the highlights I saw. And they managed to keep Leicester at bay and win away at the leaders, which is a magnificent result in the circumstances. Getting out the relegation zone psychologically will be huge. But the battle continues now because West Brom are a very disciplined team. They won't offer up the same chances on the counter. And at home, it's going to be very difficult to break them down. You've seen recently that QPR have struggled a bit more with that. They were frustrated for large parts against Rotherham. Oh, I don't know what to go for here. The feel-good factors there at QPR, they've won 3 in a row. But I just think this is going to be a game too far. I think it was a Herculean effort at Leicester. West Brom have had an extra day off. They've got a very good disciplined side. And they've got those individual moments of magic. So I'm going to go against QPR this time. I did predict them to get something at Leicester. I was the only one, albeit I didn't get all 3 points. But on Wednesday night, I am going to go for West Bromwich Albion to win. And I think I'm going to finish with a 2-0 win for the Baggies. I just think it'll be a frustrating day for QPR. And they've probably got one eye on Saturday against Borough, which will be a really big game for them. So with that out of the way, let's have a quick recap of what I've gone for match day 36. In midweek, I've only gone for 2 teams to score more than 2 goals, and that are promotion chasing Leeds and Ipswich at home to Stoke and Bristol City. I've gone for Blackburn Rovers to be the big winners of midweek in a relegation battle as the only side down there to pick up a win. I've gone for a few to be frustrated with draws, but that might just be me being cautious. And I've gone for Norwich City to get a big win away at Middlesbrough, but Hull City to keep pace with that and stay in 6th place by winning at home to Birmingham themselves. But those are just my predictions for matchday 36. Can I get back in form and win as I did 2 match days ago? Let me know your predictions down in the comments and we'll see if you can beat or match my score. If you enjoyed this one, please do put a thumbs up on the video. Make sure you come and join us again on Thursday, as we'll be looking ahead to another big weekend of action in a championship. There's so many 6-pointers coming up on Saturday's games. But between now and then, we'll be back in midweek with a Luton Premier League preview, a huge game away at Crystal Palace. And who knows, with the way the situation is at the bottom, there might be a few manager specials around the corner as well. But thank you very much for watching. Subscribe and turn that notification bell on to stay up to date with everything. Make sure you check out the link to HelloFresh UK in the description. 60% off plus free delivery on your first box and 2 months worth of discounts as well. And I'll see you back here again in midweek as we've got a double header with Premier League and Championship predictions for next weekend's action.